Hi, Jen.
Hey, Scott.
We are talking today about telling a personal story during your presentation. And I think most people get it. Stories are awesome. They are just awesome. I call them the best vehicle for getting an idea into somebody's mind. That's the way I think about it.
Our brains are wired for stories.
Yes. Yeah. Tell us more. Why are stories so super awesome?
Well, I feel we are so wired for stories because we were introduced to stories at such a young age. You know, when parents put their children to sleep, they don't say, I'm going to give you a lecture now. It's
Yeah.
it's story time.
Yeah.
Let's read a story together.
Yeah.
And also, at the end of the day, you don't go home and say to your friends or family, hey, I got to tell you about this big data dump I heard today.
Yeah, right.
I want to tell you about this story. I love hearing stories during a presentation because they are memorable. It helps for the subject, the topic to stick for the audience. It evokes emotions. They're so powerful when they are crafted and delivered intentionally. I really believe, Scott, that when a presenter can master storytelling, they have really mastered the art of presenting.
Well, and I'm laughing because I'm thinking of, I was at a wedding not all that long ago, and one of the father of the groom or the bride stood up and went into this long, meandering story. It was awkward. You know, it was in the evening and it went from light outside to dark during
there a lot of champagne at that point?
Oh my gosh, it was like, woo. So you are absolutely right. A story is not a memory. This is what I try to get across to people.
Yeah.
That personal stories come from our memory, but just to recount a memory is not a story. It turns into, well, this happened and then that happened and then I did this. And oh, by the way, I knew this guy and we went to college together, but that's not important. And then this happened. It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And a story has a structure. A story has parts to it, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you have to take a memory and put it into that formula for it to work, right?
Well, and Scott, you don't just throw a story into a presentation either.
Yeah.
It has to be relevant to the topic. It has to make sense where it ties your presentation together at the same time. So going back to your wedding example, that's a beautiful example of not everyone is naturally blessed as a storyteller.
Right.
So you need to practice your stories.
Yeah.
We talk about this. Get it on video, record yourself. How does it sound? Is it short, simple, and concise at the same time? Because you want to keep your audience engaged with your story. You don't want to bore them with your story.
Yeah, and there's an activity that I do with my clients to really prove that you can tell a very powerful, potent short story, or a story that is impactful but in a short way. And it borrows from a formula that somebody from Pixar once shared, a 6-sentence story. Now, when I do these workshops, they're usually 6 to 10 sentences, but you can literally tell an entire story. Like, you can sort of tell a summary story of the movie E.T. in 10 sentences. And then once people do that, they go, oh, not only was it short, but it was pretty good.
Yeah,
and I think, it's pretty good. And part of what happens, it isn't just the formula. We don't have time to go into this 10-sentence formula or whatever it is. But I tell my clients, you've got to really be clear on 3 things when you're crafting a story. The first one is, who's the protagonist? Who's the hero? And in a personal story, usually it's you, the person who's telling the story, right? But if it's not, you have to be clear on who's the person in the story that's making decisions, driving the action, battling against the main problem. And here's a really key part to our stories. The hero or the protagonist always changes in a way as a result of that story experience. So I say, make sure you know who the hero of the story is and make sure the story centers around that person. The second thing I want my clients to know when they're making a story is problem. What is the main problem? Because in stories, there are sometimes layers of problems, lots of little problems, but what's the main one? And then the last one is, and it ties back to what you said earlier, what's the moral of the story? Like, what's the main message you're trying to get across? Yeah. Once you know that, you can edit everything to that moral, right? That's how you keep it tight.
Scott, I also want to touch on data. So a lot of presenters, they need to present around data. Yeah. And data is intriguing to some people, and it's very dry and boring to other people. So what I love is when a presenter is able to tell the story behind the data.
Yeah.
When they're able to wrap that data up into a story, it helps it to stick. Your audience will remember it better. I believe it's 26 times more that they will even remember the data because it's been wrapped in that story.
Yeah, and people, it's easy to get confused. There's data you find a story in. You get a dashboard and you look at all the data and you dig in and do your research. That's different than data you tell a story with. And data you tell a story with is usually stripped down and quite simple. It's the very key statistics and things like that. You don't want to drag people through a dashboard of data. You want to utilize the data to emphasize the story you're telling.
Yes. Is it keeping it more high level?
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard numerous times with clients that they don't know how to find a story, especially a personal story. Maybe they're more introverted or they're shy and they can't figure out, how do I even tell a story or find a story? So here are a couple of ways to find a story, a personal story. Think of a first. What was a first for you? Maybe you pushed yourself, it was challenging, and you accomplished something. That is always a cool story to hear if it can tie to the presentation. And then this is my absolute favorite, Scott. When leaders share a story of a time when they struggled or a time when they were faced with a huge challenge, or if I dare say the F word, a time when they failed and how they through it, how they worked through that failure or that challenge.
Yeah.
Their audience eats it up because it humanizes the presenter and it makes them more relatable and approachable. These personal stories are so valuable to their audience.
Yeah, and I have to add that at the pinnacle of storytelling, when you're telling a story about yourself, a story of struggle, your audience, at least subconsciously, you're kind of a metaphor for them.
Yeah.
You tell them about your struggle, but they're feeling about their struggle. They're thinking and experiencing feelings associated with struggles that they have. And that's why stories are so inspiring, because even if you're telling a story that's a personal story of which you're the protagonist, if you're really good, you're kind of just a metaphor for the people in the audience.
It draws them into that experience, and then they can feel it at the same time. Oh, well, okay. Going back to the how to wrap this up, Scott, I really want to encourage our listeners, come up with those stories. I know we're only talking about personal stories today, which are so powerful. What can you share with your audience to really engage and captivate and open up their emotions with you?
Yeah. And I would remind people that stories are not memories. Memories maybe may be the seed for the story, but there is a hero, there is a plot, there is a moral, and all of that should guide you in crafting something that is potent and, like you said, emotionally powerful.
Scott, tell us what our topic is going to be for next week.
Well, since we're on the subject of stories, I thought we would talk about telling a customer success story. I mean, telling a personal story is one thing, and telling a customer success story is a little bit different. So we can dive into that topic next week.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you, Jen. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Please leave a review or rate us if you're liking what you have, okay, what you're seeing from us. Have a great week.
Bye.